G'day guys, welcome back to another episode of Adventure News. This one's a little late. I've been under the weather again thanks to my child picking up the latest disease from childcare, but that's nothing new. Let's get into all the fantastic stories for the month. We've got BSA coming out with a brand new Scrambler to go head to head with the BSA 650. We've got new spy photos and design filing for the Bmw F450Gs. Ural are now making a more affordable version of their sidecar setup. We've also got a mad design called Yamaha Rally Raid MT9 that's been made by an Australian company that just looks absolutely fantastic. And KTM have reopened their factory in Austria. So let's just dive into all these great stories for the month of July, / maybe August as well, a little bit. Anyway, let's get into it. So we got two different stories on this bike in the month of July. Not only did we get fresh new spy shots of it looking very close to production ready, we also got to look at some design filings as well, thanks to the UK. And we do get a decent look at this because there's no rider on this with the design filing. So we get to see small details like the exhaust has been slightly rerouted from the concept that we saw at last year's international motorcycle shows. It now looks like there's pannier mounting points underneath the passenger seat as well, although that is hard to tell. The frame, the brakes, the engine are all identical by the looks of it. And lots of other little details. You can see the indicators and the mirrors, which shows that this is going to be production model, not the concept that we're seeing the filings of. So they're pretty far along in the process. And if you wanted more proof as to how close BMW are, we also got spy shots about a week later after these image leaks. So I think these pictures are probably our best look at this bike yet, because it looks very, very polished, basically production ready to my eye. Now the thing that jumps out, and I've spoke about this before, is clearly this has got cast wheels on it rather than the spoke wheels that we saw on the concept. And I would really like to see spoke wheels on this. And I've spoke about my fears of how frustrated I would be that BMW with a bike like this should cater to both audiences. We should have a bike for the adventure touring crowd, and we should have a bike with a wheel setup for the off-road crowd as well, just like they do for the big bikes. I see no reason why they can't do the same options for the smaller category. Now, BMW have stated that themselves when they were talking about the concept, that their intention was to do a cast wheel version and a spoke wheel version. I'll put up the excerpt now as I'm talking about this. So I still hold out hope that that's exactly what BMW have planned, but they haven't reconfirmed that at all. I've just got a tiny bit of concern, but I have faith that they will do a cast wheel and a spoke wheel version, and hopefully they come to their senses and put a 21 spoke on the front. A lot of the styling cues are taken pretty much from the 1300 GS, just in a much smaller form factor. It's very hard to tell given that we don't know the height of the person riding it, but this bike does visually look like a small bike. Certainly doesn't have the presence of some of its bigger counterparts like the F900 or the 1300 GS. Regardless of its size, the ergonomics look on point, what you'd want to see from an adventure bike. That lovely rider triangle, nice tall bars, upright seating position where you can get onto the pegs fairly easily in the dirt. Suspension does appear to be adjustable from the spy shots. The problem is we can't tell how adjustable it is, so we can't see whether BMW have kept to their word. The concept bike had fully adjustable suspension, so it remains to be seen if BMW keep that. Of course, we could be seeing a couple of different models, because back in the day when I had my F700 GS, it had a completely different suspension setup to the more off-road version F800 GS. They've done that throughout with all of their GS bikes. So of course they could do this for the little 450 as well. That engine is a big part of why people are excited though, given that it's making 48 horsepower claimed and 45 Newton meters of torque. And if it's anywhere near as close as the concept to weight, which was roughly 175 kilos, then this could stack up to be a very interesting motorcycle, especially juxtaposed to the KTM 390 Adventure R, which has been released now. So if BMW can see what's going on with the KTM and think there's our chance, and they've put down some proper low-end power, because the power figures look good, we just don't know where that power is made. So hopefully it isn't too revvy and they have thought about the off-road application. There's always that concern in the back of my mind though, because one of the ways they save money is they just don't bother tuning the engines differently for this value end of the market, where they would do that for the other end of the market where you might get different power characteristics between models. You just don't see that with these cheaper variants because it's not worth the R&D. So hopefully this just is a motor that naturally performs decently in the bottom end. So we're still waiting to find out how heavy this bike is. That's one of the factors that's really going to make or break this bike, is how light it is. However, if they don't learn their lessons from the past as well as from the other manufacturers, so that is, if they make the mistake of the KTM and give it a crappy bottom end, if they don't pay attention to trying to keep the weight down, if they skimp out on the suspension, or if they just pull their punches and don't offer a focused off-road version, I think all of those things is just going to mean it's just going to get swallowed up into being just another fairly okay small adventure bike where the punches were pulled and they didn't really give us the proper off-road capable version that we wanted alongside the adventure touring option. My argument always is, and I think people get it twisted, it's not that I don't like adventure tourers, it's that that's all we ever get offered. So that's where the frustration builds up. We should be offered both versions. Hopefully they manage to keep this bike competitively priced. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Are you on the positive side? Are you concerned? Will you be following this closely? And if BMW does hit all the marks, is this going to be the bike for you? Chuck your thoughts down below. The next story is just the kind of story that makes you smile, and that is the rally raid version of Yamaha's MT-09. Done by Australia's purpose-built Moto, go the Aussies. They've basically taken an MT-09 and they've given it the Yamaha Tenere 700 treatment. And I think, at least the design-wise, it looks bloody brilliant. I love the look of this. Isn't it just fantastic when you get someone that isn't in the industry to design a motorcycle? It just immediately looks fresh. And these kind of projects can be great because not only can someone like Purpose Built Moto make this motorcycle, showcase it, and then potentially offer these kits in the future once they've standardized it to do this to your MT-09, although they haven't spoke about doing so, it's always a possibility. But on top of that, if this kind of thing gains enough traction, it might reach the ears of Yamaha some way, somehow, and get the thinking caps on, thinking maybe we should have a bigger adventure bike on offer, making basically 40 horsepower more than the Tenere 700. So that's the kind of power jump we're talking about. And get this purpose-built motorcycle is 210 kilograms. So that is 2 kilograms heavier than the current Tenere 700 and 40 more horsepower. That just sounds like an awful lot of fun. Practical? I don't know, but fun, hell yes. And I've always wanted to see what Yamaha could do with the CP3 in an adventure bike platform. And I get a lot of comments constantly saying, why haven't they done so? It seems like a great match to offer a bigger version of the Tenere 700 in the standard touring form and the adventure form and the enduro form. And with those Brembo brakes, 21-inch spoke front wheel, this looks like it could be quite a weapon off-road. I just like the fact that someone's doing something different, taking chances, and just doing something a little batshit crazy, because we really need that in the market. I felt like, at least in the last decade or so, we've really lost a lot of that craziness that the motorcycle market used to have. But even if they just did like a Triumph Tiger 900 Rally GT Pro and a GT Rally style, the two variants, the Adventure Tourer and an adventure bike based on the CP3 engine, I think that'd be popular enough as it is. I'm not sure why Yamaha don't bother. Maybe the R&D cost plus the cannibalizing of a lot of T7 buyers, maybe that's the justification, but the more the merrier, I say. I'd love to see Yamaha get into the bigger adventure bike game. Their Super Tenere, the 1200, was a fantastic machine, and I think there's a big hole in their lineup for a bigger adventure bike. Chuck your thoughts down below. What do you think about the CP3 getting the Tenere treatment? Start it up. Next up, we've got BSA coming out with a competitor for the Bear 650 by Royal Enfield, and it's a Scrambler, of course. Basic specs are that it's a 650cc single. It's making the usual 45-ish horsepower and about 54 Newton meters of torque. So very similar to the Bear 650's performance, although it is missing a cylinder compared to the Bear. Now, she's a heavy girl at 218 kilos. It's about 4 kilos heavier than the Bear as well. but it's not such a big deal in my opinion, as these bikes will spend most of their time on the road and just dirt roads, easy fire trails. These aren't meant to be enduro bikes after all. You're getting a 1917 wheel combination. So again, that's signifying to you that this is a gentle, easygoing bike off-road. It's got a 12-litre tank, 41mm forks that are only adjustable for preload. No mention of how much travel you get either, which is a little bit suspicious. And it's also nice you get Brembo brakes, so you get a 320mm disc up front and a 255mm disc out the back. Now, of course, Mahindra don't make it specifically themselves, they just own the company that does. This is a UK designed bike, and I think you can tell that. And I think in a lot of ways, this is offering a real point of difference to the Bear. You might be thinking, well, what's the point if the Bear's so good? Why would you even look at the Gold Star? Look, if you like big singles and the way they feel as opposed to the parallel twin, that's a real selling point. Now, the looks for me, I kind of go back and forth. I'm not really taken aback by it. Gun to my head, I think Royal Enfield have done it better, but I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you think they've pulled off the aesthetics? I think it looks pretty good, it just doesn't look amazing. But I'm quite happy to see that we've got another affordable scrambler on the market in that 650cc range, because there's such great value for money. So I'd love to know your thoughts. What do you think? Could this be your next trail exploration bike? Obviously, you're not going to go anywhere crazy, but you're going to look just as good pulling up at the cafe as you will riding off-road. I think it's a pretty handsome looking bike, but I think if I had to choose, I'm still taking the Bear 650. Chuck your thoughts down below. Next up, we've got the Ural NEO 500. This is a low-priced, made-in-China version of the upscale Ural we've seen from previously Russia, but now Kazakhstan, the famous sidecar model with the airhead engine. Very classically designed, because it is basically the same design that's been around for donkey years, although they have updated it with EFI and other niceties. But I think that has also been part of its charm and popularity, albeit a very expensive motorcycle, but still a popular motorcycle in its niche because of that classic design, the look, and having that sidecar, obviously. And it is two-wheel drive, so it is very capable off-road. So now we have a more affordable version. So clearly Ural have recognized that the exorbitant price they ask for the bigger Ural is getting harder and harder to pay in this economic climate. So they've looked to China for a more affordable version. Now, I love the premise of this, offering a more affordable version. And of course, going to China for that is a pretty good place to start, as they make a lot of cheap stuff. It's meant to give a lighter feel and just an easier vibe for riding, as well as that affordable price tag. Now, the motorcycle itself, we actually do know what it is, and that is a Yingyang SUV 500. Now, you would be able to look at that bike and extrapolate out what the specifications are going to be, but Ural has stated that they're changing the motorcycle significantly, so a lot of the specifications are going to be irrelevant. So we're going to have to wait and see what Ural has done to the bike to find out the true specifications. But you're going to expect things like the TFT screen, that modern design, a decently sized tank. The bike, at least in its yin-yang form, the SUV 500, makes around 35 horsepower. So you could guess that it's going to be somewhere around there, depending on how much performance tuning Ural does themselves. But they actually have stated the reasons why they went with this SUV 500. They said it's the platform for them, offering the best performance currently built in China. I mean, I'm not quite sure about that, but sure, let's take them at their word. The other thing was that Yingyang is a relatively small company compared to a lot of the other motorcycle companies in China. It's still huge by Western standards, but it's at least a little bit smaller than some of the others in China, which means they're a little more flexible, and as Ural said, willing to work with us and be flexible with the production of this motorcycles. But they have said they're not changing the visuals, and get this is a direct quote from them: "We don't really care about that at this point." That is a really interesting statement, because that makes me a little bit concerned. Nothing against the modern look of an adventure bike, but at least personally, from my perspective and my own personal tastes, the whole attraction of the Ural to me is not just the fact that it's a sidecar, but it's also that it's a classic airhead design from way back in the day. That motorcycle still harkens back to the original designs all those years ago. I get the feeling that they might have underestimated how much people liked the classic look of the Ural as one of their biggest selling points. Am I missing the point here? Do you think there'll be just as many sales for this modern looking adventure bike? The point I'm trying to make is maybe they should look at the aesthetics of this adventure bike and change it significantly to make it look more retro, to stick with the Ural brand, because I feel like this might be too far of a leap. And the last story of the day, let's end on a feel-good one, and that's that KTM has reopened the Austrian factory, which is fantastic. I think for Austria, that is a big win, as KTM is a big part of their economy over there and provide a decent amount of jobs too. So the fact that they've reopened, I think, is just good for everyone involved. And it also answers the question, at least for the short term, of whether this big injection of liquidity from Bajaj Auto was going to mean that they were going to move all of production to India. At least in the short term, the answer is no. Clearly, they have the intention of keeping the Austrian manufacturing going. But the little piece of me behind in the back of my head is thinking, how long will this last? Will Bajaj keep the production in Austria? Or will they just not be able to shy away from the temptation to bring all that knowledge and design capability of those high-end ready-to-race motorcycles over to India at some point? It's a question I cannot answer, but it's one I find myself dwelling on an awful lot. Personally, I'd love to see it stay in Austria. Keep KTM connected to its roots, I think, is the smartest move, but it might not be the smartest move for Bajaj with production costs and all of that stuff for KTM. It's nowhere near as cheap making a motorcycle in Europe as it is in India. And that's just brass tacks. And as always, this is a business, so who knows what will happen in the future. But for now, it's a feel-good story. So let me know your thoughts down below. Are you happy to see KTM reopening their Austrian factory? How long do you think it will last? Or were you one of those people dancing on KTM's grave, hoping that they didn't make it through all this financial turmoil to start with? Chuck your thoughts down below. And on that happy note, it's time for me to say goodbye. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, guys, don't forget to stay shiny side up.